Hey guys, Don Amon here, founder and president of Minutemen Coffee. I want to welcome you to the very first Minutemen Podcast. I am here in the new Minutemen Coffee studios in the great state of Texas, and I am here with one of my best friends and fellow patriots, Clay. Clay, welcome to the show, and I'm glad to have you be a part of this.
Yeah, man. Glad to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be exciting. Guys, there comes a time where it's time to speak up, and I believe that time is now. And one of the things that I've been wanting to do for a very long time was to bring the Constitution back to the conversation over an amazing cup of coffee.
Sure.
So, when I founded the company almost 5 years ago, my focus has always been the Constitution.
Yeah.
And the fact that I believe the soul of my being that it was divinely inspired because we are a Judeo-Christian country.
Country, yes.
And the whole point of me starting Minutemen Coffee was to give me an excuse to put the Constitution out into the public.
Yeah.
And I am really thrilled at the fact that we're able to sit here in a brand new studio that we're building out, and it's going to be changing over the course of the next couple of weeks, thanks to my loving wife. But we want to, what our main focus, what we want to do is, and we're gonna as we do our introductions, we want to bring the relevance of the Constitution back to modern times. We want to look at how it affected our founding fathers before, during, and after, during the Continental Congress. How it affected, and a lot of this came about just simply because we're living in this crazy dumpster fire.
Yeah.
And in the last 3-4 years, and we're going to talk about how we met and the reason and what brought us to this point.
Yeah.
And it was coffee.
It was.
Right?
It was.
Coffee brings us together. We are a coffee drinking nation. December 16th, 1773 is our holiday. And that's when my heroes, who we're what we're calling now the MAGA, that'd be the MAGA of the 1700s, they threw the tea into the harbor. And I believe that since then we became a coffee drinking nation, and coffee brings us together. So let's look at, and going through this series, to bring the Constitution back, bring its Christian heritage back.
Absolutely.
Because I do believe that we have fallen so far from that. So, Clay, tell us about yourself. Everybody knows who I am already over the last 4.5 years, whatever. We've now celebrating our 4th year. But tell our audience who you are and why you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, my name's Clay, born and raised in the great state of Texas.
Great state of Texas, baby.
Absolutely. And 20-plus year law enforcement veteran. Gotten to see a bunch of good stuff, a bunch of bad stuff.
Right.
And I'm very, very, very passionate about my faith, about my country. And that's kind of what got us here. You know, we've been talking about this for a pretty good while.
Long time.
Yeah,
we have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we met, it was sort of funny because I was in a little 12 by 20 shed in my backyard.
Yeah.
And I don't think we were even 6 months in.
Yeah.
And it was funny that 6-month period, our graphic designer came in and you see all the amazing bags and, the Don't Tread on Me. But I remember getting this message from this guy from, I think it was like Patriot Quartermaster.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, you were part of a gun,
gun
store.
Yeah.
And I remember that first email. And tell me, what caused you to reach out? Because I get contacts all the time.
Sure.
But for some reason, I felt compelled to reach back. But
absolutely.
Share with them.
No. So I had purchased a bag of coffee. It was American Patriot roast, and it was really good coffee. And the way I grew up, man, most of the coffee in our households down here is going to be like that regular supermarket brand, whatever.
Sitting on the shelf for 18 months.
Right. Because it's just not, until recently, coffee hasn't really been anything down here like it is up in the Northwest.
Right.
It's starting to kind of establish itself more down here. But anyway, so I had always been under the false assumption, that coffee was coffee. So I bought some because I liked your message, I liked your packaging. And when I brewed it up, I was like, man, this is really, really good coffee. Like this is different.
Right.
So that led a little bit to me reaching out to you. But the other thing was it was right during the Kyle Rittenhouse thing.
Pre-pandemic.
Yes. And it was just, you used the term dumpster fire. It was just the nation was going crazy.
Yeah.
You know, and still is, but that's another. We'll get into that.
Yep.
But you had sent out an email to the people that had purchased from you, and had essentially said like, "Hey, they are painting Kyle Rittenhouse in a false light. Like this man, this young man, because he was a young man,
17 at the time.
This young man defended himself and did nothing wrong, and I'm going to stand behind him." And for me, you know, there's been a lot of people that have jokingly said, you know, if you want to know what Clay thinks about something, ask him; he'll tell you.
Right.
And I kind of take that as a compliment because I try my best to be genuine. You know, you're not going to get much BS from me. But when you sent that out, that was also during a time where there was a lot of corporations, a lot of kind of quote unquote conservative corporations that were maybe not bashing, but definitely distancing. Do you know what I mean?
Yep, I do.
And when you came out and said, "Hey, I stand with this guy," I just thought like it touched me, and I was like, you know, I want to let this guy know that I appreciate him standing up and being bold about what he believes. And so I reached out to you, and it was literally just like, "Hey, man, great coffee.
Yep.
Keep it up." And
I still have that message, by
do
the way.
you really?
Yeah, I do. I still have that message.
And that was what,
almost 4 years ago?
Yeah.
3, 4 years. Yeah,
Yeah, something
four
like
years
that.
ago that summer. You know, and it's funny because I've always been one to just speak my mind.
Yeah.
I have no filter. I know I'm going to have to filter a lot of what we're going to be talking about, not just tonight in the introductory show, but as we go forward. But I have always been in the core of my being just not afraid, you know. Kyle Rittenhouse to me, and again, Kyle, if you're listening, you know, he came under a lot of scrutiny. They did everything they could to destroy him. And I remember we were sitting there at the original roastery because we had moved out of that little shed, and we were in our bigger facility. So this was late 2021.
Yeah.
And I remember our staff, we had a big 60-inch screen up, a big TV.
You're talking about during the trial.
During the trial during the verdict.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there and just, I was emotional. I remember getting emotional, just the fact that they did exonerate him across the board. And, you know, to me, Kyle Rittenhouse, and I'll say this like I've always said it, Kyle Rittenhouse was the first American hero of the Second Civil War. And I believe I'm the only, I believe I coined that. Nobody else has got the kahunas to say it, but I'm not afraid of that because it's true.
And you know, I remember you saying that.
Yeah.
And undoubtedly that's a bold statement to make.
Yeah, buddy.
But I don't think necessarily it's inaccurate.
No.
Simply because if you look at unfortunately, if you look at the path that our country is on, I fear that we're only going to see those situations like that unfold more and more and more.
We are.
As we continue down this path. Now, you know, this podcast will dive into a lot of the things that we need to be doing along the way.
Agreed.
A lot of documents and a lot of scripture that needs to be
addressed.
You know, along the way. But I don't think that is really an inaccurate statement.
No.
You know, Kyle, if you look at it, and I don't think we planned on really talking about Kyle all that much on this,
we didn't.
But it's how we kind of it was the catalyst that got me to reach out to you.
Right.
But it was so much bigger. His situation was so much bigger than him.
It was.
His situation, had it went the other way, was it would have been a sign to all Americans, all Second Amendment loving Americans. You will do what we say,
right,
and you will shut up about it.
And, you know, and it's funny because when we look at when the whole purpose of founding the company and to be able to share the Constitution, That was the whole purpose. Coffee became a byproduct. You know, coffee is the only commodity bought and sold based solely on the beliefs of the company and the consumer.
Right.
And, you know, it's funny because I make this joke, you know, I could have named this Labrador Lovers. And, you know, I have 2 labs, Vader and Sawyer, and they're my kids. But, you know, if people knew that I gave a percentage of our proceeds to a Labrador rescue and somebody's going to watch this and the next thing you know, there's going to be a lab coffee. Yeah. But if they love dark roast, they'd buy the crap out of my black lab coffee.
Sure.
So my whole focus was always been the Constitution, and I as we were going through Eric Metaxas' book, the Letters to the American Church, that really set into my heart that now is the time, because I truly believe that this country has fallen so far from its original roots, and we are under demonic attack. And I'm not afraid to say that. Yeah. I am not afraid to be bold, because my heart tells me I would rather be afraid of God than afraid of man.
Absolutely.
And those blue-haired basement dwellers that send me death threats on a weekly basis. We don't get them as much now that we're in Texas. Yeah. And because of the fact that we had met and we'd established this relationship, that was the driving factor of uprooting from the communist state of Washington.
Oh, yeah.
Because during the time after Route 91, after the shooting, after the pandemic and me getting sick, which we'll talk about, because that's something that the public needs to hear about, what really happened up in the communist state of Washington. Sure. But so many things were happening, especially after the shooting in Vegas that my wife and I were involved with. We needed to get out of that state. Yeah. That state is not business friendly, and having a group of God-fearing men in a God-fearing state. Yeah. Now, I know that Texas has its own problems as well.
Yeah, everywhere's
going to have their problems. But in my heart of hearts, I felt truly that Minutemen Coffee could thrive here and could be a part of the change. And so with this podcast, my focus and my goal with this podcast is to take the Constitution. It's not going to be that old drum, you know, we're in college now you know, but I have a lot of contacts that are constitutional scholars. We have a lot of preachers that are constitutionally based. You know, we have a lot of firefighters. We have a lot of law enforcement, because, you know, I'm on the fire side, you're on the law side, and even cops need heroes. Right. And the reality is that how does the Constitution, with history always repeating itself? Yeah. Because it always does. Yeah. I want to look at and dive into and bring into layman's terms so that we could all easily understand how it affected our founding fathers. Because our founding fathers were accused of a lot of the same things. They were they were villains. I mean, they were villainized. What's the difference between 1776, 1775, 74, 73 to the 30s? Where Eric Metaxas in the Letters to the American Church looked at what Bonhoeffer compared to the German church, where we are today. So that's an amazing topic we're going to talk about. Yeah. But then now look at 24. We're coming up on the election. Yeah. And if we don't have a revival, if we don't have a coming to Jesus, and that's really what it is.
Absolutely, yeah.
This country's in a lot of problems.
We are. And the thing is that, you know, if you look at like Metaxas' book, which that man, he's got multiple books, but the one that we're referring to is Letters to the American Church, and just a great book. He has a follow-up book to that. I think I've told you about it. It's called Religionless Christianity. It's an awesome book also. And then, of course, his masterpiece is Bonhoeffer. Yep. It's over Bonhoeffer. But, you know, if you look at the German church in the 1930s, leading up to as the Nazis are gaining power, and the German people are starting to see this wickedness, this evil that is starting to grow. Right. And starting to take hold. Bonhoeffer was a part of something that they called the Confessing Church. And the Confessing Church was essentially a group of believers that stood up and said, I don't care if you're a Nazi and you try to tell me what to do, I'm not going to violate these principles. Right. This is what I stand for, this is what I believe, and I don't care who you are. I'm not changing this.
Do you see that, and not to interrupt, but do you see that happening in today's environment?
I will say this: there are people that are starting to really take hold in the Christian sphere of influence, I guess you could call it.
Right.
One of them is Alan Jackson. He's a pastor in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
That man, I actually attended. They had a Culture and Christianity conference back in the spring.
Yeah, remember that.
Eric Metaxas was there. A few other people were there, and it was absolutely awesome to see an auditorium full of people that are starting to wake up, and like Alan, he puts out content very regular on YouTube, and he addresses those.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with that, or not the problem with him, but like in the German church, there was only about 13% that were part of the confessing church. The other 87 either actively went along with that wickedness, that evil,
Mm-hmm.
or they just said, we'll set this one out. We'll just be quiet. And if you look at that, man, that that's the 1930s, but it was the exact same way in the founding of our nation.
It was,
You know?
and that's one of the amazing parts to me, and that's one of the things that I really want to bring to the show is we want to dive into that. We want to
Absolutely.
look at and compare because we have what they didn't have.
Yeah.
We have in 2024, now 2025, the hindsight of the ramifications of the actions, not just of the people of Germany,
Right.
but now the founding fathers and the fact that 3% of the population stood up against the tyrant
Right.
king, where there were still a lot of loyalists to the crown.
Sure.
And then there were those who were just sitting back and they were just waiting to see what happened.
Sure.
That proves that history always repeats itself.
Well, and we have something, you talk about the benefit of hindsight,
Mm-hmm.
the benefit of history. We also have the benefit of so much information at our fingertips.
We do.
We should be the most educated people on the planet.
Yep. We should be.
And of course you have to discern what you read on the internet and discern what you watch on the internet. But the content of what we're talking about, you're talking about our founders, or you're talking about the German church of the 1930s, where if they wanted to study Martin Luther,
Right.
or if they wanted to study a previous empire, as the founding fathers did, they would have to go and find these actively seek
them
these
out.
documents, right?
Right.
We can literally refer to Dr. Google
Right.
and
In 3 clicks.
and 3 clicks, and it's in our hand if
Right.
it's not being censored.
Right.
Um,
And welcome to censorship.
Exactly.
Right.
But that, when we look at that,
Right.
and we look at the power that we have as American people, there is no reason. Somebody said, and it might have been Metaxas, I can't remember, but somebody said that the evil that we are facing as Americans is not unprecedented.
No, it's not.
What is unprecedented is the silence of the church.
Yes.
That's unprecedented.
It is, and that's a concern of mine, and it's a concern of yours as well. And I think it's going to be a concern of the people that are going to be tuning into this.
Yeah.
I think people are hungry for information, legitimate information, and we're not here to preach.
Right.
We're not preachers.
Right,
We're
no.
just average American
Yes.
Texans.
Yes,
Again,
absolutely.
And a lot of people don't realize I was born in Lubbock, right? Raised
That's
in the
barely
North.
Texas.
Yeah, it's barely Texas. That's what I keep hearing over here in East Texas. But I truly believe, and I've said this before, God brings people into our lives for a reason. There's a reason why you reached out to me, whether it was and in this case
Right.
it was coffee.
Yeah.
But I truly believe that He brings people into our lives for a reason, and that reason is an impact. How are we going to impact? And Chuck Swindoll said it best. It's 10% of what happens to us and 90% how we react to it.
Sure.
And so we have to take that 90% and bring that into a show that. And before we did this, I've done the research.
Yeah.
Just like with Minutemen Coffee, I never did research on this.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that there were so many veteran-owned coffee companies out there, and the
Right.
majority of them don't even roast their own, and
Yeah.
they put they're flavoring it with off chemicals, and I can go on and on. But the point is, I truly feel that not just only our subscribers at minutemencoffee.com, minutemencoffee.us, but I believe that people are hungry for information that they can trust.
Sure.
And I think that they're realizing where we're going as a country is so far out of kilt. That it's like that sailboat's just heeling over, and we're hitting that wave and heeling over. There's so many things that people they're scared.
They are, and it's going to take I think you used this term once before. It's going to take a holistic approach.
It is,
and that holistic approach is really going to be the foundation of what we are addressing on this podcast.
Yeah.
Where we take historical events that we have learned from. We take historical documents, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, Bonhoeffer's teachings, things like that. Then we take scriptural truths, biblical truths, and you take both of those elements and then inject them into our current situations. And that is where the scripture talks many times about discerning the times that you are in. And that is how we are going to be able to discern these times and to be able to navigate some of these. I mean, it's cloudy water, man.
Very cloudy. It really is.
And there's certain things that all of the culture will tell you that you have a false opinion about that you're wrong on this, or that you're xenophobic, or that you're homophobic, or that you're whatever it may be. All these phobics,
right? Right.
And you go, no, this is my truth, or not my truth. This is the truth.
Yep.
This is the truth. This is the scriptural truth. This is what it says.
Right.
Okay. Furthermore, this is what we have learned from history. And this is how it relates to this question that may be before us today. That holistic approach is how we have to continue moving forward, because it's going to be a bumpy road.
It is. I think it's not just going to be bumpy. I think it's going to be incredibly turbulent.
Yeah.
And the beauty of the Constitution and the fact that we've given out over 500,000 constitutions since we started this, that was my focus, right? I wanted to be able to share this what I consider the second most important document ever written with as many people as I can. And I figured out, okay, the catalyst would be coffee, right? How cool is that?
Yeah.
The reality is, then all the death threats and the what I call the blue-haired basement dwellers, the demons.
Yeah.
The Constitution was written for everybody.
Was.
And it doesn't care about the color of your skin. Now, there's going to be a lot of the left that's going to say, well, it was written by a bunch of rich white men. No, it was we the people. We have unalienable rights,
right,
granted by our Creator, right?
Right.
And you had mentioned before in a conversation that John Hancock, right?
Yeah.
Do you really think that John Hancock, it would benefit him and his wealth to go against the king?
Right.
No.
Right. No.
So to me, to be able to take that document, the second most important document ever written, only to the Bible,
right,
and to allow it to protect all of us,
right,
our free speech, our Second Amendment rights, because it takes the second to protect the first.
Absolutely.
But all of those rights and the Continental Congress, and what we're going to be diving into in later shows, we're going to be looking at every episode. We're going to be talking about the First Amendment, Second Amendment. We're going to briefly talk about it. It's not going to be that that collegiate
not like an
level.
Academic.
No, it's not academia.
Yeah.
I want us to look at this holistically and look at it how it pertained to not just to the founding fathers who drafted it during the Continental Congress, fought over it. Because can you imagine sitting in that room in Pennsylvania in the middle of summer in the wool? I mean, oh my God!
But that is where you look at the priorities of man, the priorities that were before them. They understood the power of self-governance.
They did.
And they understood that, listen, what we are trying to build here is bigger than you.
Yep.
It's bigger than me.
Right.
We have to figure out how to do this.
I call it the greatest experiment in the history of mankind.
Oh, yeah.
Self-government.
Self-government,
yep.
And, they even said that, I forgot who said it, but if the politicians ever start basically voting themselves into more wealth or more power or anything like that,
They will do it.
It's over.
It's over.
It's over. It's done.
So where does that put us now then? Because
it's
over. And again,
Yeah.
I truly believe that everything is happening for a reason. And, we'll go back. And one of the things that really was laid in me as a young child, as in junior high school, I've told you before, there's been two very influential men in my life, my father,
Right.
and then my history teacher.
Right.
Of all people, my history teacher,
Yeah.
Frank Embry, was my history teacher. And I remember we would sit around, I had four other buddies, and on Friday nights, or pretty much every night, we'd sit around Sherry's, which was like a Denny's. So we had
like
Sherry.
a breakfast place.
It's a 24-hour breakfast, and back when you could smoke, and we were big smokers. And
In 8th grade.
And yeah, right. And we'd sit around and we philosophized over Ayn Rand, Animal Farm. That was Mr. Embry really drove home to us to read these. Did you ever move 1984 out of the fiction to nonfiction? Because I know I did.
It needs to be, yeah.
But with that, he set us aside. I believe it was like 9th or 10th grade year, maybe 11th. He set us aside one afternoon and said, "Guys, listen, by the time you graduate, we will no longer be able to teach accurate American history, and that the curriculum is changing, and your children and potentially grandchildren will not know true, accurate history." And that has stuck with me from that day forward. That has driven me to dive into history, to dive into that rich scriptural history, constitutional history, our American history, because it is the greatest experiment in the history of mankind, and that's self-governance.
And you look at what, like, you talk about Orwell.
Yeah.
In 1984, they specifically, in a fictional, environment,
right,
start changing history.
They do.
They start altering history because it didn't fit the narrative of the government,
correct,
of Big Brother,
right?
And I've told people that I'm friends with and family. I'm like, have you ever read 1984? Oh, I've heard of it. I'm like, you have to read 1984 because you will be shocked. And I'm sure that most of the people listening to this podcast have probably read it. If you haven't, make sure that you read it.
There was a meme. There was a meme I remember seeing. It was a picture of a lady on a bus or a train, and she had the face diaper and the face shield and the gloves, and she's reading 1984. And the caption was, "Is somebody going to tell her?"
So
Anyways, I digress. But when it comes to accurate American history, it's always written by the victors.
It is.
And the reality is, and what we talked about just a little bit ago, and I want to touch base on that again, is the fact that we have hindsight. Not only do we have scriptural facts,
sure,
the way that it was written,
sure,
we have the hindsight that Bonhoeffer had in the 30s looking at the German church. We have hindsight of what our founding fathers went through before, during, and after. And I really think that we, as we dive into this, it's really going to open up the eyes of the audience, because, and I hope that it's that revival, because my gut has been saying, I know yours has been too, we are going down a path that I don't know if this country is going to survive.
Yeah. You know how big of a role faith plays in my life. And we are, a lot of the problems that we are facing as a country is because men, specifically men that know better, have not stood up and said so.
Why do you think that is?
Because the demons, whatever you want to call them.
I call them demons.
They have done a really good job at instilling a spirit of fear into the American Christian. We have gotten to a point, in the book of Revelation, in chapter 3, I think it is, talks about all the different churches.
The seven churches.
The lukewarm church, compromising church, all that stuff.
Yep.
And we have kind of taken all of the worst elements of all of them and made them into the American church, and that pains me.
Yeah.
I grew up in the church. My grandfather was a pastor and a preacher for 50 years.
Yeah.
I am very passionate about my faith, and I do not say any of this is as any type of animosity towards the church.
Sure.
What I'm saying is that I've lived this my entire life, and what the church in America has gotten really good at is throwing gumdrops and lollipops at the congregation.
Yeah.
Hey, taste this; it'll taste good. Taste
Right.
this; it'll taste good.
Right.
Meanwhile, we are sacrificing at the altar of comfort, at the altar of not feeling convicted.
Right.
We are sacrificing truth.
Yeah, we really are.
And, you know, when we talked about this podcast, one of the things I told you was that when I get on here, I want to speak truth.
Mm-hmm.
I want to speak truth boldly.
Yep.
I want to speak it correctly, you know, not to stir up stuff that just doesn't need to be stirred up.
Right.
But to speak it boldly and to speak it unapologetically. Because at the end of the day, there is only one enemy of truth.
That's it.
And that's Satan and his angels.
Yep.
And as Christians, we are called to seek out truth, and we are called to speak truth boldly. Paul talked about speaking boldly as I should speak. That is how we need to be as modern American Christian patriots.
Right.
So
And I believe that it's important because not only when you look at and you bring in Scripture into the Constitution, because of the fact that the Constitution was divinely, we are a Judeo-Christian country.
Absolutely.
It was founded on the Judeo-Christian principles.
Absolutely.
And we're going to get into that. That
Yes.
is one of the topics that we're going to talk about. And during the Continental Congress, we're going to talk about the breakup of the breakdown
Sure, of the
different denominations.
Sure.
Because during the Continental Congress, could you imagine the infighting and the struggles that these guys had? But I look at it in today's environment, where we have so many of our soldiers that have sworn to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. What does that mean? What does that mean to them?
Right.
And how can we convey to them not only our gratitude, but the fact that there's a lot of people that are waking up that this country has fallen.
Yeah.
And this country, where it's headed, just look at the headlines.
Yeah.
And we're not political. I don't like politics. I mean, when I talk politics, the three-letter agencies show up, and you know that.
Yeah.
And so because of the fact that ultimately it comes down to why Minutemen Coffee? Why are we here together?
Yeah.
Why are we studying specific elements of not just the books that we're studying, but the Bible and the scriptures that we're studying, but how can we share that to the average person? That I know that people are hurting right now. Mm-hmm. I know that people are scared.
They're hungry.
And they're hungry. They're hungry. They're hungry for something.
Yeah. Yeah.
That I truly believe.
I think they're hungry for the truth, honestly.
They are.
And I think that that is part of this awakening. That is a part of this revival.
Mm-hmm.
The only way that this revival will spread across our country is first through repentance, and then secondly through speaking truth.
And because of the fact that we're going to be talking about a lot of these topics, the reality is there are the demons out there that hate facts and logic. They hate truth.
Yes.
That is one thing that what bothers me the most. And it's really opened my eyes, just in the last couple months, at the fact that it's not that the media is lying to people; it's the fact that people are still believing them.
Right.
That is so foreign to me. That over the last 25, 30 years, and most people know because I'm a huge fan and friend of Alex Jones and the whole show, and I've been involved with them over the last 30 years. Yeah. But I look at this and I look at the persecution that he's gone through, the persecution that Tucker's gone through, that persecution that Pastor Mark Driscoll in Scottsdale's gone through. It is amazing to me that when you speak the truth, the demons come out.
When Alex got canceled, whatever you want to call it.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
You know, I told someone because I've never not been an Alex Jones fan, but I've never been an Alex. It was just one of those things that he wasn't in my podcast playlist.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I didn't really have one way or the other. But when they canceled him, I told somebody, I said, listen, regardless of what you think, the fact that they have essentially silenced him.
Yes.
To
an extent. But
to an extent. Well, and back then.
Oh, yeah, they shut him down.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Back then.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those deals where I told somebody, I said, that was a test run.
It was.
I said, because Alex was such a controversial figure.
Sure.
That, hey, man, let's do a test run on Alex. Nobody's going to care, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this, and this is a testament to him, is since then, I've watched some of his stuff. I've listened to some of his stuff. And there's a certain level of I don't want to call it prediction,
right?
But he is really good at taking like, hey, this is why I think this is going to happen. Now, sometimes his delivery could maybe be a little bit more refined, you know.
I don't think so. And it's funny because I want to bring him on eventually, and because again, as most of you know, we roast his coffee.
Yeah.
So tip of the spear, Wake Up America.
Yeah.
Over the last 25, 30 years, and it was funny because I remember 5 years ago on our YouTube channel, because I reload and cast my own bullets, and I wanted to start this. I mean, this was almost 7 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I remember drinking this coffee that I got from InfoWars store, and this, I'm a shameless plug for InfoWars, but it was ironic to me that literally 5 years to the week, I was in Austin, and sitting there with Alex, like we had known each other for years, and roasting the coffee.
He, because I'm sure you saw his. It was with Tucker, right?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Oh yeah.
Tucker did a great job. Alex did a great job.
They did.
And I will say this: like he has been vindicated on a lot of the things. But regardless of that, what the people are hungry for, what I'm hungry for, is for people just to be more bold.
Yeah.
If you believe what you believe, then believe it.
Yeah.
Believe it.
Yeah.
And we have an entire generation that has been taught and conditioned to, okay, now you can believe that,
but just
between 10 and noon on Sunday.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Okay? Now, after that, you can you can believe it, but don't you dare say it.
Don't you dare say it.
And what kind of believer are you if you accept that? Right. And that's I'll be honest with you, and you know this about me, but that's somewhat of a personal journey that I've been going through, because I'm not going to ever say that I believed that, but I think I maybe went along with it a little bit too much.
I think a lot of us have.
And now that I see that, you know what, my posterity is going to have to pay the price of my silence.
Right.
It's gotten to the point where if there's going to be heartache, if my kids or my grandkids are going to have to suffer, fill in the blank, whatever you think is coming down the pipe.
Right.
I want to go to the grave knowing that I did everything I possibly could to stop that from occurring, and that includes speaking boldly as I should speak.
Right. The one thing that a lot of people, what they fall short of, and we all fall short, but what I'm getting at on that is the reality is we need to be bold. We need to stand up for our convictions and stand boldly, because I will take this as far as that I can take it.
Yeah.
And the reality is, and we talked about this before, I will not compromise.
Right.
I will not compromise my faith. I will not compromise my freedom. I will not compromise anything that is my inalienable rights. I will not agree with anybody that seeks to destroy me, my country, my family, my faith, my company.
Yeah.
Lives, fortunes, and sacred honor.
And I think that's a good distinction of saying, like, listen, there are certain things that are on the table for compromising. There are certain things.
Certain things, very few.
But what we have gotten to a point now is that for me to compromise over this, it is to completely abandon this moral,
right,
or this belief,
right,
or whatever, and not just a belief. It's a core of who I am. You are wanting me to turn my back to God to follow man, and when you get to a point where a country is so split like that,
which we are, I still can't believe how divided we are.
Yeah, when we get to a point like that, it's a very, very, very dangerous position. Very dangerous position.
It is, and I think that it's critical for us to stay grounded, to stay rooted in our mission, and our beliefs. I was watching a sermon, John Lovell of all things. I wasn't planning on bringing him up.
Dude.
He is an awesome dude, but he was doing a study in Acts, and he was talking about the freedom of speech. And everybody wants to have the freedom of speech as long as it falls in line with what they believe.
Yeah.
And that's how far we've come. And I'm going to stand bold. I have. I mean, look at what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to back down. And
I want to say this because I think it's important to tell, since this is our first episode.
It is. Yep.
I think it's important to tell the viewers that this is not going to be a gripe session.
No,
for
absolutely not.
30, 45 minutes a day. This is not going to be. Now, we are going to talk about hard topics. We're going to talk about some very dark things that are coming to our nation. However, we have the power. Our founders knew the power of the American Patriot.
They did.
And we were founded, and we have lived in such prosperity and freedom because of the American Patriot. And we can go back to that.
Mm-hmm. We can.
And there is a clear steps for us to do that. We just have to be man enough or woman enough to do that.
We do.
And that's what we're going to talk about.
And it's really important to know that my belief has been, and one thing that's really been on my heart a lot lately, especially being down here in the great state of Texas.
Yeah.
We need to be bold, and we
100%.
need to embolden men and women of this country to stand up and to be non-afraid.
Yes.
I would rather be afraid of God than man.
Yes.
And I am afraid of God more than man.
Yes.
And that's where I'm willing to jump on this podcast bandwagon and to bring this out there, because I truly believe, and we'll talk about this in multiple episodes, obviously. But my question, over my lifetime, why am I still here? I should have been dead 4 different times.
Yeah.
And
we talked about that.
And I look at this, and I mean, you knew me during the last 2 of 2 different times, and so we'll get into that. But folks, if you want to be a part of this show, if you want to come in, and for those of our Coffee Club subscribers, you can go to minutemencoffee.com, get signed up. Our new website is minutemencoffee.us. But we're going to be protecting the brand, protecting this podcast. It's at the Minutemen Podcast on YouTube. It's going to be at the Minutemen Podcast on Rumble. We're going to be plugging in on Truth. We're going to be plugging in on Getter. I mean, we're going to do everything that we can. Rumble. I don't know about the whole Facebook thing, because who would have ever thought in our lifetime, Clay, that the Constitution would be considered hate speech?
Well, according to the New York Times, it is.
Absolutely. So, guys, thank you for joining us on this very first episode of the Minutemen Podcast. We are so glad that you've decided to tune in. Obviously, like everybody on YouTube says, click like, click subscribe, send us the comments. We're going to take it good, bad, and the ugly. We know the blue-haired basement dwellers are out there. The demons are going to show their head on this, but we're going to stand strong. We're going to continue to drink this amazing coffee. We're going to continue to have this amazing dialogue. Clay, I'm glad to have you part of this organization and part of the show.
Absolutely.
I can't wait to get these guests coming on.
It's going to be fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to bring. I think we're going to bring some hope back, and we don't have much time. I mean, we have maybe 15 weeks before this election,
and who knows what happens. What
happens after that. So, guys, remember, arm yourself, educate yourself. For God's sakes, prepare you to defend yourself. We really hope that you come and join this coffee revolution and this Patriot revolution. Let's stand bold together, and we'll see you here this next week. Take care and God bless.